there is a hidden provision in Trump's one big beautiful bill that successfully passed the House of Representatives controlled by the Republicans in the dead of night. And this provision is perhaps the most scary and one of the worst parts of this bill, which is saying something given the awful policy measures for the vast majority of Americans that are already included in this bill. None worse than this one that would essentially make Trump king of this country and remove any sort of check on his power that the judiciary still has. But before we look at that, please be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment down below. Let me know what you think about this. So we have a Substack article here from Robert Reich, who is some of you may know him, a longtime outspoken progressive, a longtime ally of Bernie Sanders, and generally not somebody that the establishment Democrats in this country absolutely love. We'll put it that way. So Robert Reich here, the hidden provision in the big ugly bill that makes Trump king. Don't let this happen. Friends, I've been following with a mixture of dismay and disgust Trump's one big ugly bill soon to emerge from the House. I'll report back to you later this morning, but I want to alert you to one detail inside it that's especially alarming. With one stroke, it would allow Trump to crown himself king. As you know, Trump has been trying to neuter the courts by ignoring them. The Supreme Court told Trump to facilitate the return of Kilmar Abrego Garcia, a legal resident of the U.S. whom the Trump regime admits was erroneously sent to a brutal prison in El Salvador. Trump has essentially thumbed his nose at the court by doing nothing. Lower federal courts have told him to stop deporting migrants without giving them a chance to know the charges against them and have the charges and evidence reviewed by a neutral judge or magistrate, the minimum of due process. Again, nothing. Judge James Bossenberg, chief judge of the Federal District Court for the District of Columbia, issued a temporary restraining order preventing the Trump regime from flying individuals to the prison in El Salvador without due process. Judge Bossenberg has found that the Trump regime has willfully disregarded his order. What can the courts do in response to Trump's open defiance of judges and justices? The courts have one power to make their orders stick: holding federal officers in contempt and enforcing such contempt citations against them. Enforcing a contempt citation means fining or jailing the Trump lawyers who argue before them and possibly invoking contempt all the way up the line to Trump. Bossenberg said that if Trump's legal team does not give the dozens of Venezuelan men sent to the Salvadoran prison a chance to legally challenge their removal, he'll begin contempt proceedings against the administration. In a separate case, U.S. District Court Judge Paula Zenas has demanded that the Trump administration explain why it is not complying with the Supreme Court to facilitate the release of Abrego Garcia. Zenas questions whether the administration intends to comply with the order at all, citing a statement from the U.S. Department of Homeland Security Chief Kristi Noem that Abrego Garcia will never be allowed to return to the United States. According to Zenas, this sounds to me like an admission. That's about as clear as it can get. So what's next? Will the Supreme Court and lower courts hold the administration in contempt and enforce contempt citations? Not if the big ugly bill is enacted with the following provision now hidden in the bill. Here it is. This is the provision that would make Trump king of America. No court of the United States may use appropriated funds to enforce a contempt citation for failure to comply with an injunction or temporary restraining order if no security was given when the injunction or order was issued. Translated, no federal court may enforce a contempt citation. Obviously, courts need appropriated funds to do anything because Congress appropriates money to enable the courts to function. To require a security or bond to be given in the civil proceedings seeking to stop alleged abuses by the federal government would effectively immunize such conduct from judicial review because those seeking such court orders generally don't have the resources to post a bond. Hence, with a stroke, the provision removes the judiciary's capacity to hold officials in contempt. At UC Berkeley School of Law, Dean and Distinguished Professor of Law Erwin Chemskinski notes, this provision would eliminate any restraint on Trump. Without the contempt power, judicial orders are meaningless and can be ignored. There is no way to understand this except as a way to keep the Trump administration from being restrained when it violates the Constitution or otherwise breaks the law. This would be a stunning restriction on the power of the federal courts. The Supreme Court has long recognized that the contempt power is integral to the authority of federal courts. Without the ability to enforce judicial orders, they are rendered mere advisory opinions which parties are free to disregard. With this single provisions, in other words, Trump will have crowned himself king. So what can we do here, right? If this is to pass, it would basically be practically the end of democracy in America with one fell swoop, because of the courts would be completely neutered to do anything against Trump. And, you know, I would like to see the media reporting on this a bit more, because this seems like it is perhaps maybe the most significant part of this bill is this provision in here. And, you know, I wonder if this provision that's been snuck in there will somehow possibly invalidate the larger contents of the bill, based on how blatantly unconstitutional this hidden provision is. It is absolutely unconscionable to just completely remove 1/3 of the checks on Donald Trump's power, especially when we know that the Congress is basically turned into a rubber stamp of every single one of Trump's policy measures that he is seeking to implement. And in Trump's administration, he's surrounded by a bunch of yes men. This is one of the key differentiating factors from Trump's first administration. Is in Trump's first administration, you had some adults in the room who were willing to stand up to Trump, even if in private most of the time, stand up to him and give him a piece of their mind, and not just be rubber stamps. But now Trump has surrounded himself with completely loyalists, people who are yes men. And with that being the case, and with the Congress being a rubber stamp, the only check on Trump's power that we have left is the judiciary. So it would make sense that the Trump administration, given its authoritarian tendencies and a complete disregard and disrespect of democracy in this country, would seek to completely eliminate the remaining power that the judiciary has to check Trump's power. But you know, we need to be raising hell about this as the Democrats, and I wanted to make a video on this because I think it's even given everything else that's absolutely awful for the American people that has already been extensively reported on in this bill, it's quite possible that nothing goes any further than this provision here that Robert Reich laid out in his article here. That's all I got for you guys in this one. Thank you so much for watching. Please be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, comment down below, and have a great rest of your day or night. All right, take care.